You have now decided that the condo life is for you. And now you want to know what to do next, especially if you are a first-time buyer. Stick around for this video. We're gonna talk about that today. Hi, I'm PPE and this is the Peso Pro episodes where we talk about money management tips and peso tricks. Today, we're gonna venture for the first time into actual real estate investing. And some cases, this will be the biggest purchase in your life. Typically, your primary residence will be one of those big ticket items that you will pay for the rest of your working career. Most housing loans tend to be at least 15 years in term or may span until 30 years if you take the full length of the loan. So getting to know the right steps and right considerations in buying a condominium unit will be very critical, and it's also very exciting, especially if you're buying it for the first time. Today, I'm gonna assume that you are dead set on buying a condo and will not even consider other forms of real estate like a house and lot or a townhouse unit. For now, we're gonna specifically talk about condominiums because I believe a lot of us who are working in CBD areas or in Metro Manila will really consider condominiums because they offer great value for our day-to-day lives. Some of the most common and probably very well-known benefits of condominiums is that they tend to be right in the heart of the central business district, or at least about 30 minutes to an hour away. This provides you with flexibility to get to your place of work, assuming we now go back to the normal ways of working, and it also gives you access to all of the amenities that are there in the business district, like nearby malls, nearby parks, or even your churches, and everything you technically need to live. Condominiums also offer very different perks than a house and lot. You get all of the amenities like a swimming pool, a gym, or a convenience store on site. And you also get the added protection of having 24/7 security and having a property management office that you can call in case something happens, like a busted pipe or a light bulb that needs fixing. However, also, we all know that buying a condominium is not cheap. It's a bit more expensive because while these come with perks, then you also have to pay for certain services that you get with your condominium unit. Without further ado, here are a few tips that I personally learned when I bought my first condo unit, and I'm sharing them with you so that you have a better understanding and more knowledge going into your first major purchase. Or, if this is not your first major purchase, maybe you've left out a few things. So here we go. Tip number 1 is to think about the location of the property. I know some people say don't worry about location too much, or location may not be the biggest single factor, but it may well be because location, for the most sense, actually determines a lot of things. For one, the most practical thing is location sort of determines the commute or the travel time you have to work. So if you're like me who tries to be at least within 30 minutes to an hour from my place of work, then location is going to be very important for you. Or if you're a young family starting out, location may also include the schools where your kids will likely study at, or maybe a church or an organization that you frequent, so that you factor in all of these things. Because again, when you buy a property, there's a very big chance that you will probably stay there at least for the mid to long term. Consider the ideal location for you and put in a couple of contingency like a plan B, plan C, in case the location is maybe a bit out of your reach, so that you know the radius that you're considering. Tip number 2 would be to know who the developer of your condo property is. I could not stress this more. The developer of your property would probably be a very, very big determinant of the quality of life that you will live in that condo unit. Being a shared space, condominiums rely on the community working together. So things like, how is the property management office being run? What kinds of programs are in place? Are there common area management in place? Is there a plan to actually maintain the interior and the exterior of the building? All of these things you will know mostly by asking people who have lived in similar properties from that same developer. In a lot of cases, the major developers in the Philippines will already have projects that are fully occupied with actual tenants already in the condo. So ask ahead and try to get your friends' inputs or maybe other colleagues or acquaintances to get very direct feedback as to how this developer manages the property. Sometimes the cheapest is not the best, but in a lot of cases also, the most expensive condominiums are also not the best. So the best way for you to ascertain the support that you will get is to talk to actual tenants from similar properties so that you get an unbiased opinion. This is also magnified, especially if you're buying a pre-selling unit. Not seeing the actual unit itself can be a bit scary, but if that developer has a good track record of finishing on time and with quality, then you're probably gonna be okay. Now we get into the technical parts. One of the most common questions I get on real estate would be, which is better, buying pre-selling properties or ready for occupancy or RFO units? And the answer can be very, very different for different types of purchases. Let's assume in this case that you are buying your primary residence, meaning the unit will be the unit that you will live in. You're not buying it for an investment property or whatsoever. In that case, consider a few things when you weigh your options between pre-selling and RFO. Some of the strong sides of a pre-selling unit would be that typically pre-selling units cost less because they are still in the construction phase. Then you probably will have some capital gains because at the time when the condo is ready to turn over, the price would have gone maybe 10 or 20 or even more after the certain number of time that it's being built. This is true because we've seen in the past that pre-selling units typically sell for maybe about 20 to 30% cheaper than their actual market value at the time of turnover. So this can be a good way to save money. In line with that, because you're buying a pre-selling unit, you can also stretch the down payment that otherwise you would have paid for in cash when it's a ready for occupancy unit into several years. Typically, a condo is being built maybe over 2 to 4 years. So, there are a lot of cases where you can actually pay for the down payment in 48 months. Some even offer longer payment terms up to 60 or 72 months. This makes it a bit easier on the pocket because you're essentially paying for the installment of that down payment and you're paying for it at 0% interest, meaning it's just the principal amount that you're paying for every month, so it can be manageable. Pre-selling units also give you the choice on which units you actually want. So in a lot of cases, if you have the first mover advantage, you can actually select the unit number that you want or the parking slot that you want that may be close to the elevators, or if you want a certain view or a certain side of the building, then you probably have first chances to select the actual units that you like versus buying them as ready for occupancy when most of the units are already sold and you're left with the remaining inventory for you to choose from. While pre-selling can be a good decision for some people, there are also a few cons. When you're doing pre-selling, that means that you don't have a place to live in for the time being. So while the condo is being built, then if you don't have any other primary residence, say for example, you don't live with parents, maybe you come from the province and you went to Manila for work, then this may actually mean that you have to juggle your rent and your down payment payments at the same time. That can be a burden to your wallet over the course of the few years that you are paying for both, and you have to assess if that's a choice that you can take. In my case, for example, maybe 8 years ago, I made a conscious choice that I couldn't manage both a rent and an amortization at the same time. So, what I did was I tried a balanced approach and I decided eventually that I would take a ready for occupancy unit so that I don't have to pay for both and I just select whichever one. So I paid rent up until it's time to move and I paid the amortization when it was already in the condo when it was turned over to me. There are also other pros to buying an RFO unit. You can actually see the actual unit itself, so there's no guessing game whether you like the tiles or you like the color of the cabinets being built in, or if there's a sun direction that you don't want, meaning if it's facing a certain way that you don't want. So all of these very, very theoretical things in a pre-selling incident can be very, very tangible and actual things if you buy it at a ready for occupancy state. Okay, so now you've considered location, you've considered the developer, you've considered now whether an RFO or a pre-selling unit is the right one for you. Good job. Now we go into numbers. Number 4 in the tip list is to figure out how much down payment do you need. Let's say, for example, that you chose the case of an RFO unit. Typically, you would need about 20 or 30% of the selling price to put as down payment because banks will not loan you the full amount of the property. Banks, as a practice, will only loan you about 70 to 90% depending if they have special agreements with the developers that you are working with. Some developers have partnerships with banks that allow them to actually have clients get approved for up to maybe even 95% of the total contract price. This can be a great way to bridge the gap on down payments because then if it's a 95% bank loan approval, then you only need to show 5% as down payment for you to be able to buy the unit. Well, that's good from a cash flow standpoint. Obviously, because you loaned more, then you also pay higher interest on that bigger amortization. Consider down payment as part of your readiness checklist. If you are choosing RFO, make sure that you have enough money stashed for the down payment and other fees that may come into play when you buy your unit. If you're buying a pre-selling unit, the down payment can be an easier conversation because you have multiple years to pay for that. The tip for pre-selling is when you can, try to pay as much down payment as you can. Maybe even up to 40% if your budget allows it because one, it's staggered across maybe 3 to 5 years and you're paying no interest on that amount. This means that when the unit is turned over, you actually pay only the balance amount and only will need to loan that amount from the bank, which will save you interest in the long term and also maybe allow you to finish the loan much faster. The next step on top of down payment will be to account for other costs. And I think this is where most people slip. In other costs, I have a list of about 4 items that typically get lost in the conversation or where your broker may not actually proactively tell these things to you. So this would be the time to grab a pen and paper to list all of these down. Number 1 on other costs would be closing fees. In a lot of cases, the closing fees are disclosed to you, and these can be in the range of 6 to 11% of the total contract price. Taking the higher end, this can be in a condominium unit that's costing you maybe 5 million pesos. This can be as much as about 500 or 550,000. It's quite a sizable chunk that when you're buying it as pre-selling, this will come as a big shock to you when it's turnover time and you need to pay closing fees. Simply put, closing fees are the fees that you need to pay for the developer to be able to transfer the ownership from them to you. So this will include notarial, transfer of the titles, or even other taxes and fees that come along with it. In a lot of cases though, developers partner with banks for them to be able to broker that these closing fees can be added into the loanable amount, which helps because then you don't have to shell out so much cash. But again, every time they transfer this to the bank loan, then you also end up paying higher amortization and higher interest on that. But that helps you at least so that you can afford the condo right now. The second cost in the other cost list would be bank financing fees. Bank financing fees range from the appraisal of the unit to actual documentary stamps that you have to pay on the loan documents and other processing fees. Mind you, this can be easily several tens of thousands and sometimes can even reach up until about 80 to 100,000 depending on the amount of loan you're processing. These can be very big, so you have to plan for them. The best way to plan for them would be to ask a partner bank on an estimation, or you can simply ask a friend who has done this before in a similar unit with a similar cost so that you have a ballpark estimate as to how much that is. The thing about bank financing fees is that they are due as of the point in time that the bank loan is going to be completed. So meaning, if na-approve na kayo and ready na silang bayaran yung developer with that loan that you got approved for, then these bank financing fees will also kick in. The other thing is, these bank financing fees cannot be applied to the loan amount. Meaning, kahit mas malaki yung in-approve sa inyo na loan, you cannot use that to pay for these fees. These will be paid out in outright cash. In my knowledge, parang walang installment options for these fees, so please prepare for those. These can be very significant costs that may hit you if you don't prepare for them. As a good rule of thumb, typically, bank financing fees will be in the 3 to 4% range of the total contract price. The third of the other costs will be your move-in costs. Typically, the condominium property management office will ask you to pay deposits on your Meralco or Manila Water or other utilities for deposits. These may come in several thousands and may actually be a surprise cost that you did not factor in. You also have the cost of actually moving in. So, paying for a lipat bahay truck or some people who will help you move into the condo unit may be an additional expense that you won't have foreseen if you haven't moved places at all in the past. The last in other costs that I can remember is the cost of insurance and taxes. Right now, you're a new homeowner. And before, especially if you were renting, taxes and insurance are probably things that you never worried about for the property that you lived in. However, now that you own a property, you're subject to real property taxes every year and insurance payments for fire and your mortgage redemption insurance or credit life insurance. This is the insurance that your bank or lending agency will most likely require that you take a life insurance policy on the amount of the loan, such that when you, as the borrower, pass away for any reason, then the bank is covered by that insurance and the loan is paid in full. These can be several thousands of pesos every year in insurance and taxes. So make sure that you factor that into your annual operating expenses so that you don't get shocked when that bill comes every year when it becomes due. A few tips to manage the other costs would be, for real property taxes, pay for those annually and in advance, and in a lot of cases, cities will actually give you a 20% discount. I made an RPT video that I will link to right here. This is for 2021, but similar processes should be in place for the following years. Also, for bank financing fees, if you have the luxury of time and if you want to shop around, some banks typically will have a promotion that will waive certain fees up to a certain amount, or they may actually be in a promotional cycle in their financial year and they want to attract more clients, so you can actually save on bank loan fees that way. My most recent bank loan, I was able to save about 70,000 in fees because I was able to get the loan at the right time when a promo is being offered by that bank. So that can be a good amount of financing fees that you forgo. So make sure that you shop around and try to figure out if there are promotions ongoing so that you can take advantage of those. Now that you've factored in costs and down payment, one of the best steps that you can take before actually signing a contract to sell or confirming a reservation with a condominium developer is to get pre-approved for a bank loan. This is a very important step, especially if you haven't taken a serious loan before. Meaning, let's say you don't have any history of debt, be it consumer personal loans or car loans, and you haven't really tested your credit score yet, it would be good to go to a bank and try to get pre-approved for the amount. Banks would typically ask you to pay for an appraisal fee, so the best way to manage this would be to go to a bank where your condo developer has a partnership with. In a lot of cases, if you're buying direct from a developer, some banks will actually waive the appraisal fee because they know roughly what the market value of that property is, and they can immediately assess how much of a loan can they approve you for. This will be a tentative amount, and they will probably give you a ballpark number. At least, if you have pre-approval, you know that when the time comes that the loan needs to be applied for, you will technically be approved if your circumstances do not change. It is very important because a lot of people do not take this step and just jump into the pre-selling mode. When it becomes time to turn over and they go to a bank, because of certain circumstances or maybe past credit history, they get denied. And when you get denied and you don't have the millions to pay for your condominium unit, you're left with only one recourse, which is to do in-house financing. In-house financing, while easy because you're technically borrowing money from the developer himself, so it's very easy as a transaction. You just fill up forms and they will charge you for the loan that you're taking directly from them at a premium rate. This can easily be double the amount of interest that you pay a bank. I'm not joking. Some in-house financing schemes get you to pay about 12 to 14% per year when the typical bank loan in housing loans will be in the 6 to 7% range. Not having pre-approval from the bank can be a sticky situation, especially if you don't know your credit rating or history. So make sure you take the time to get pre-approval before actually jumping in and having issues later when it's turnover time. Lastly, in all of the tips, would be to account for your amortization costs and other costs related to the house as part of your financial planning. This means that you have to account for kung magkano ba yung estimated amortization plus taxes plus fees, especially since you're buying a condominium unit. Account for the association dues that you paid in the condominium property for the upkeep of the common areas, and also account for your share in the utilities being used for the common areas like electricity and water. So, lahat naman nakikita niyong lights around the property or the watering and gardening that your service staff are doing all consume electricity and water. So, everybody shares in that as a share of the number of square meters that you own against the total size of the property. So you get your proportionate share, which can be a couple of thousand pesos also on a month-to-month. So don't limit your analysis or your planning to just the amortization amount. There are a few more fees that can easily add up, and typically these will come in as a monthly cost as well, with the exception of taxes that may come in every year. As a good rule of thumb, what you can use is when you assess that amortization plus all other associated costs, this ideally is only about 30% of your total gross family income. What does that mean? If you and your husband or wife or a partner in the family earn two incomes to support that entire household, let's say you earn 100,000 gross, the good rule of thumb would be only to loan an amount that is up until 30,000, which includes the amortization in the loan and the other associated costs. If higher pa siya than 30%, you may end up in a cash crunch kasi may other personal expenses pa kayo na babayaran like your utility bills, groceries, food, and whatnot. 30% is probably a good gauge, but obviously this can change person to person. So use that as a rule of thumb, but assess as part of your total financial plan based on your realities month in, month out. Make sure that you account for the total cost, which means amortization plus all of the other fees on a monthly basis, because these bills will come due, and if you're not able to pay for it because you didn't plan for it earlier on, then it may actually lead to default, and default may lead to foreclosure of the unit that you so very hardly worked for. I know this video went longer than I expected, but I hope that when you think about buying your first condominium property, all of these things that I mentioned are enablers for you and hopefully does not dampen your spirit. Overall, owning a property is a very, very big accomplishment and you can do it too. With proper planning and proper analysis of where you are today in your life and understanding the expenses and income that come with your total family scenario, where you are in your career, and what have you saved and invested up until this time will get you to a place where you understand whether you're actually ready to buy a condo property or not. If you feel you are, make sure you go through the tips again and try to accomplish most of them and try to go as to a level of detail that you really understand the true cost of ownership. Owning a unit is very fulfilling and there's a sense of freedom on the space that you finally truly earned and you will enjoy in the long term. Make sure that you prepare for all of these tips so that you don't get into the risk of foreclosure later on, which can be a very, very devastating blow. I hope those tips were of value and they helped you get into a sense of understanding of what does it mean to actually buy your first property. If you want to learn about real property taxes, this video will help. Or if you want to grow your money while you build enough to buy your own condo, these investment videos will help as well. If this video was of value, please hit like and subscribe, and I'll see you in these videos.